obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry podcast. I'm Krista Olien, and I am joined by Clyde Wilson and Leigh Thomas. We are here today to recap our interview with Mike Lauder from Scheidt Bachmann. We are so excited to discuss all of the knowledge that he shared with us, some of which is way over our heads, but some of which we can really talk about in application and how it impacts operations and the day-to-day boots on the ground jobs that we're most familiar with and the data that we use to do our day-to-day job here at TPN. So, Leigh, what was one of your biggest takeaways from that conversation with Mike?
Thanks, Krista. I so enjoyed this conversation with Mike. He was so knowledgeable about some really big ideas, and I felt like he did a great job of communicating them to listeners like me who really, I don't have any prior knowledge about cybersecurity stuff, but I just thought he did a great job of teaching all of us what his expertise is. But the one thing I really clung to had nothing to do with cybersecurity, but it was more about his story about how he came to the position that he's in today and how he appreciated each task or each job that he had before he was the CTO, I think, of Scheidt Bachmann. And he described it as every new position he gets, he doesn't take off a hat, but he actually puts on another. So he has like this Dr. Seuss stack of hats on top of his head of all of the things that he's really good at, not necessarily because of his role as a CTO, but because of all the interesting things he did before that makes him such an effective CTO now. And he used the phrase, I'm going to forget it now that we're recording. Perishable skills. And that just reminded me that some skills we really value, but if we're not intentional to keep them up, we might lose them. And that just kind of put that on my awareness, just that there's some things I know how to do and I don't want to forget. So I need to be intentional. So those were my takeaways.
Yeah, and I think for perishable skills, that's so important because our technology is moving so fast that if we don't stay in touch with it, we will be so out of tune with the changes that have made and come into place since we were using those skills that it's natural for us to evolve as little changes are made, but it's really hard to close the gap whenever we've been out of touch with things and the big changes have been made when you look at how it used to be and how it is today. Yeah, I agree. His takeaways from being in the field, how he entered parking was as a technician, so working on the hardware. But his true expertise was from his prior position, not related to parking, where he was working on software and really that kind of IT side of things. So I appreciated that also, and how he's taken both of those to help evolve Scheidt Bachmann to where they are today. Clyde, what was your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway was it was really interesting because of the length of time I've been in this business. It was interesting to watch him transition through time, from the time when we were an all cash business and I didn't know people like him existed, to the gradually move away from cash, all the things that went along with that, the changes in staff, and then to move into the future. And now we're in this area where we have people all over the world taking shots at our business, taking shots at our data that we have. But we're living in a world where the data has to continue to grow and we have to continue to use it. And I think the most interesting thing I got from him, and something we just recently as a group experienced, the decision to move away from a cloud-based system back to the site for a number of reasons. And it was interesting just to me to listen to this conversation of a life that I've been through and to hear it from some of the technical people that I really never worked with every day. It was great. This was a tremendous podcast. It was interesting to listen to, and I enjoyed it very much and got a lot out of it.
Yeah, one of the terms that he used was on-prem, keeping things local on the local database. A lot of that terminology, we encounter it, but we don't necessarily have to use it. like what we do is we have locations all over the country, and monthly we'll need to go in and access the data remotely so that we can conduct our testing, perform our performance monitoring, and develop the report for our clients. Well, we have to pass these certain tests whenever we get a new location, or if anything changes with the firewall, it interrupts our job of remoting in. And that's some of the pieces that we deal with cybersecurity and PCI compliance and things that have to go into place. But one thing I didn't know, that talking with Clyde afterwards, was that it's not only the equipment, the parks equipment, so Scheidt Bachmann as an example, that have to maintain that level of security. It's also the operator on site, because they are the merchant of record for those credit card transactions. So it's kind of a double coverage, as you will, for security of information and what it takes to keep that data safe in both perspectives.
The real challenge listening to him as I was listening through this was, we're trying to run the parking business. And I think it's always interesting for the newer people that come in to hear them go, I didn't realize this business was this complicated. And you realize the complications of what we do just day to day. And then you listen to this podcast and you realize there's this other pie sitting on top of this that has its own level of expertise, its own people who have learned specific challenges. And if you just look at it and you go back and read through 10 years of Peter Drucker or Harvard Business Review, that they're trying to talk about running a business, it is terribly important. And I remember the first time I saw this. I can remember the conversation the first time I saw this, when I said, this technology side is growing so much. The demands on us, the demands on what we do every day, we derelict if we don't go outside and find the best people there is at this and have them holding our hand. Trying to do this ourselves is not the smartest thing in the world. And the Peter Druckers of the world would more than happily tell you that's just a part of managing a growing business. You have to find your team of the things that you have to have around you to do it. If, not everybody that builds airplanes knows how to fly one, but they know how to build their part of it. And when you're flying them, you want to be darn sure they know how to build that part.
Yeah.
And that it works. So it's the same thing. It was very interesting to listen, because I could play back through my head all of these things that I've been through and watching businesses change. And it was tremendous, entertaining to see the direction he was going and what he said.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the international conversation too, the international component of Scheidt Bachmann. So they are an international company, so they do have kind of a wide range of perspectives on what other countries are doing in their approach to this concept of security and data security and cybersecurity. So I thought that was really interesting too, that everybody's not attacking it the same way or approaching it the same way, but we all kind of have to get to the same level of security for our customers in the industry, just across the board. Another piece is that the regulations in the other countries are different too, which I also thought was interesting to learn about the different regulations, and that maybe the US is the strictest. It's a little comforting.
We are, we may be the strictest, but we're also slow to move. The chip and pin that you have today, that was a long conversation of getting us from magstripe to chip and pin
On the credit card.
We're there now, but I fortunately had the opportunity to talk to the president of the Bank of Canada about this problem. And he said, Clyde, we've already made the decision. You guys are behind us. We've made the decision. We're moving to chip and pin. It's already done. I can't change it now. We're moving to chip and pin. And I don't remember the year, but I think that was 94, I believe. And we didn't move to chip and pin until just recently.
Well, I am interested in this history of credit card and cybersecurity things. So something that Clyde mentioned to me earlier is that in the parking world, airports were the first to introduce credit card payments and therefore have to deal with security and all of that. So Clyde, would you tell that story to our listeners today?
Yeah, I'll go to that, but I'm going to move backwards for just a minute. Part of the reason we're behind, and I learned this, I can tell you also when I learned this. 2001, when I went to Africa, same thing with this. We have such a big infrastructure. So how many, and I don't know the number, how many credit card readers are there out there? In every lane, in Target, Walmart, all the shops all over the place, every gas pump, everything. Well, when you go to chip and pin, you got to change them all.
Mm-hmm.
How many million of them do you have to change? So you might want to make sure that's where we're going before you decide to change that. And when I was quickly tell the story about Africa, before then I had heard so much about how Europe and certain places, some of the Asian countries are so much ahead of us in technology. And I thought, how can that be? I mean, this is America. Nobody's ahead of us, right? But it was really bothering me that people really said we were behind. Well, when I get to Africa, this was 2001, so it was a while ago, they were ahead of us in cell phone use for one simple reason. We had 87 zillion miles of telephone lines across the country. They didn't have that. So they had to skip it.
Mm.
So they made the jump right to cell phones. Same thing in Asia. They didn't have it. So they made the jump when cell phones came out. All of a sudden, now I could have a telephone. I couldn't even have a phone before cell phones came out because they didn't have the 87 zillion miles of telephone wire. So we fall behind sometimes because we're so ahead. We were so ahead in developing a phone system that we built this huge infrastructure that was a problem. In 1991, I was working for a company called Apcoa Parking. I was there in 1988 up to 97, the start of the parking network. Apcoa Parking was really, in 1990, would say, started taking the lead in what little technology we had in the parking industry in that time. So they were really thinking ahead of where this world was headed. And there were three guys, Jim LaRocco, who was a wonderful, wonderful guy that I reported to, and a young technician type guy, Jack Santa, and a few other techs that we had around there. And Apcoa Parking was the Airport Parking Company of America. So we dealt a lot in airports. I didn't. I was urban. I don't remember. I'll have to have them tell the story. But of that group of guys, one of them said, if a 7-Eleven can put a credit card machine on the island where I buy gas and I don't have to go into the store, why can't we put a credit card reader in the lane and I don't have to go to a parking lot? Mm-hmm. So they started building one. And they built it. I remember those guys built it and installed it at Cleveland Hopkins Field. It was the first credit card only lane in the parking industry. And I may not have my timing right, but I think it was 91 or 90. So Jack Santa, I was really watching what they were doing, mainly because I was so excited that these guys were really out there pushing this new technology. We're still a heavy cash business. We're almost 100%. But you could see sooner or later it was going to move. So they did it. And Jack Santa calls me one day and says, okay, Clyde, we've got this. We've pulled this off. We can process credit cards in the lane at the airport. When do you think we're going to be ready to do this in urban parking? And I didn't want to be a curmudgeon, but I had to look at the reality. And the reality was something that was a little different. As I explained it to you guys, I could see the realization of something you hadn't thought about. In 1992, credit cards were not used for $8 and $10 purchases. Credit cards were $100 and $200 and $300 purchases. It was credit. I was buying something I wasn't going to pay for now. I was going to pay for it over time. Well, I didn't buy a $6 parking ticket on credit, so I paid for it with cash. But the ATM rule had started. So in our business, and I told Jack, I said, Jack, we're not ready. You can't put this in urban parking because our prices are still too low. The only thing I was smart enough to know was that our prices were too low and people were not going to use a credit card style purchase for parking.
And prices at airports were so high because the length of stay is so much longer.
Yes. And also New York City. Parking in downtown New York City had already moved to credit card. It was, I don't know whether you guys can remember this or not. It was the dial-up credit card. So you had to swipe it to dial the phone number every time you swiped it to the credit card company. But there was credit card in New York, and then these guys put it at airports. And So then I'll tell the rest of this story that I'm not sure has a lot of meaning here, but in 1999, I was doing, by this time I'm the parking network now. I was doing a consulting audit job at Washington, D.C.'s valet, Washington Dulles Airport's valet system. And I get there. This is 1999. The hotel I'm staying at is Sheraton. It was built in probably 1960, right? So it was built before everybody was running around with a laptop computer plugging it in. There was a plug-in station over there, and it was way over there from where my desk. So I get in the hotel room. I've got to start getting ready. I sit down to plug my laptop in, and I go, I'm halfway across the room. I can't even get to the plug. So it's Sunday afternoon. I've got to make it somewhere that I can go buy an extension cord to be able to work. So I go to Target. I think it was a Walmart or Target. I go there, run in, get an extension cord. I go to the 10 items or less line, and I'm standing in line because it's almost closing time. Lines are filling up. I'm 8 or 10 people back, standing there holding my extension. And I'm just paying attention as I move forward. And we move forward. I'm like next in line, and I went, holy cow. Everybody ahead of me used their ATM card to purchase or a credit card, right? It's happened. We're now using these for small purchases. So somewhere in between there and the car on a Sunday afternoon, I called Jack Santa and said, it's happened. It's time. We can start moving this into the parking business. And they did. They did. But that was, guys, that was just 1999. It's not been that far. To me, that hasn't been that far ago. So that transition has happened, and now we're dealing with all this other stuff. I guarantee you cybersecurity was not on my mind when I was standing in line at Target. But now it is, and now it's become this major thing. He told us a story of 15 years ago, this one group they got to look at their firewall and how many attacks they had, and it was like millions in a day. Of attacks on their firewall. So this is a big subject. In the parking industry, we're dependent on other people to be able to pull this off, but we do have to know a lot about this, and it does have to become a part of our financial reviews to kind of look at what's happening within a company in terms of how they're handling cybersecurity.
Yeah, I liked his perspective about we talked about AI a little bit and how that is really going to change cybersecurity, and how he is looking at it from a perspective of using the tools that the attackers are using.
Yes.
To try
that
to
was
protect
really interesting.
it. It's like genius. That's why we need people like Mike Lauder in the parking industry.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's exactly right. I remember him talking about that, thinking, holy cow, that was terribly smart.
Well, and I'm thinking if credit card and ATM card usage really got underway in the 1999-2000 era, that means that PCI compliance stuff is about 25 years old. And I think about most 25-year-olds that I know, they're quite intuitive and brave and creative. So it kind of makes sense that the age of this idea is such that it really does need lots of hands-on attention.
Yeah, well, I think that you're exactly right. And it's terribly interesting when you look at the timing, because guess what? The next 25 years is going to go by really fast. And those 25 years are going to be 50, and they're going to be as bad as all of us and not understand what's coming, because this isn't going to get easy or less challenging. And it's impossible. I say this all the time. You can't predict the future. I mean, you can predict out a few years, but you can't go out 10 years or 25 years. But we went through almost 80 years in the parking business, reaching out, hitting a button, and pulling a ticket. And we're still doing that. But it's starting to go away. We're not going to be doing anything similar to that 20 years from now. And whatever it is we're moving to today won't be here 20 years from now. We're at that age now where Moore's Law is kicking in all the time. It's changing everything we do. The funny thing is, though, it still seems to be taking about 30 years to make the whole change.
Yeah.
It's funny that as much there's more coming at us. It's really coming, and it's coming really fast. But it's still, to go through the change is still about 30 years.
And I mean, we've talked about how the transition from cash and all of those things, and talking about the credit card and the debit card. We talked to a client recently that still has a cash box. So it's been 25 years, but we are not completely away from cash in the parking industry. That's for sure. We're a long way away from it, but not completely away.
But some people just have a hard time.
Well, it's at that point, it's an investment to dive in and get equipment for the first time. It's a big change whenever you're still doing it the original way. One of the other things I really liked that we talked about and that you just kind of touched on, Clyde, is that if you see a change happening, you need to take action on it. So your story about the airport and how they were ready for credit cards, but the everyday transient parking operations were not ready for credit cards. But you didn't jump on it like telephone pole, right? Telephone wires, but you waited. And then whenever you started to see that we were ready, you recognized it. You were
Then we
wise
went.
enough to recognize that it was time. And even though you were here at the parking industry or at the parking network, you recognized it for the industry as a whole and how you saw that that was about to change everything that we do.
Right. That was 1999. And in 2007, we went live with Focus Point Parking that was cashless. And everybody told me very happily, Clyde, you're absolutely nuts. You can never do. And I just kind of got used to being told I was nuts.
The thing I really appreciate about this conversation with Mike helped me understand some conversations that we're having with some current clients. We're working with a facility on the West Coast to integrate some new equipment. And we were all having a meeting recently, and I was just a fly on the wall, taking notes. I wasn't actually participating. But I was so intrigued to hear our client.
You were the AI. AI.
That's right. The original AI.
The original AI.
It was cool to hear our client ask the equipment manufacturer, just straight up asked, how are you going to keep our customers' data safe? And because of recording this podcast and having conversations with experts like Mike, I understood the gravity of that question.
Right. It was very, very, very great question and very timely. And it was nice that you understood it. You understood exactly what was going on in this conversation. Yeah. So it's, and I did that on purpose, mentioning AI. Guess what, guys? This is here. It's terribly interesting. People out there think they understand it. They don't have a clue. We're in the early days of AI. It's just beginning to scratch the surface to show its head. We're seeing the early parts of it, but we don't really know where this is going and what it's going to do to our business. I can promise you one thing. When you're hiring today, you better hire somebody that can survive the next 30 years because it's going to be a very demanding business they'll be in 30 years from now. Are we still in the customer service business and we're still parking cars? Yes. But as we move through this PCI compliance and the cybersecurity and cloud-based versus on-site, what was the word he used again, Krista?
On-prem.
On-prem. Right?
On-prem.
I kept hearing him say it, and I thought I should know what he's talking about, but I don't. But we're going to move through this again, and it's going to be interesting.
One of the things to keep in mind is that as we see these things start to evolve and start to impact parking specifically, if we do our job well, we will stay in tune with the little changes that we see impacting our industry, and we'll know when it's time to say go if we are staying in tune with how it's impacting parking.
Right. I read to you guys yesterday, and I won't spend a lot of time laboring on this. I'm going to use it again here pretty soon in a newsletter and maybe a presentation that we're doing. But I changed it. It was lead like the future is already here. I changed it to manage like the future is already here. You don't know what the future is going to be, but you know it's coming. And you know it's going to be different from where you are. So if you manage every day the same, you're going to get run over. If you have to manage like we now know AI is coming. Somewhere in here it's going to impact our business. We know cybersecurity is in the middle of this evolution of going from the cloud back to the site. It's not through weaving, it's coming somewhere else. So you have to manage like you're staying prepared for these things. And that's very important for us because we're evaluating operations. And we have to look to the future, but we have to also be smart enough we don't know what the future will be.
And not to jump too soon. I think that's another piece of the wisdom that the industry needs to, not to jump too soon, because then you're invested in something that maybe is already outdated and you don't have the ability to be nimble and jump to the next thing that's here to stay.
That's right. Interesting. Guys, we really enjoyed this. We enjoy all of the podcasts that we do with talented people. It's always interesting to learn something. I think we picked up another good piece with this one, and something that we're fortunate enough to be able to share with our listeners.
Yeah, 25 years from now, I'm going to be excited to look back and marvel at where we've moved to and how right we were, how wrong we were along the way.
I'm going to be on this podcast and I'm going to be saying back in 2025 when AI was new, and I'm going to be able to tell the story like Clyde can tell his stories.
I love it. Well, to everyone in the parking industry, including ourselves, I hope you're still here in 25 years and making the parking industry the top of the class and evolving with all the newest, latest, and greatest things with wisdom, discernment, of course. But thank you for being here and listening to the Our Parking Industry podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time. To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on Our Parking Industry podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.